Some of my favorite books are on the table today, and I'm delighted to tell you that joining me on Books Alive is the fabulous author Avi. Coming up next, stay with us. Thank you so much for joining us today, and it is my absolute delight to tell you that my guest in the studio is the one and only Avi. Welcome.
Thank you to have me.
This is just really great. How many books have you written, Avi?
Well, there's 59 published.
Wow.
We don't count the bad ones which were not published, right?
All right. So it's been many years, many awards. How many Newberys have you got?
I've won one Newbery and
for Crispin?
And 2 Newbery honors.
2 honors.
Yes.
Okay.
Second place.
Second, well, we'll take it. Any one of us would take it. So, you know, I was telling you over lunch that I worked for a number of years in an independent children's bookstore, and that as your books would come in and we would read them, I always had the sense that you wrote in different periods. In other words, you had a Poe period and you had a Dickens period, and there were all these different kinds of books so that nobody can pigeonhole you. And how would you explain that?
I'm not a pigeon. Basically, I'm a reader, and reading is, I think, the key to writing. The whole world of books and libraries and schools, the book is central. And that's certainly in my case. I read a great deal. There's not a lot that I'm not interested in. There are many things that I start to read, I get involved in. But the other thing is that I never really studied writing in any formal way. And the way essentially that I became a writer was through reading. And it wasn't as if I only read science fiction or Shakespeare, but read an enormously broad spectrum. From a very early age, I went to the local library, public library, and was free to take the books that I wanted, and did, and read, and my parents never really checked on what I was reading, or anybody for that matter. So I was, you know, the result is that I would say the breadth of the reading, not necessarily the depth, but the breadth is very, very wide. And since I never studied writing, was never taught that you do it this way or that way, I like Hemingway. Well, then write with these short, crisp, emotionally driven sentences. You like Shakespeare, Dickens, write that way, if that's what the story demands. So when I choose to write a book, sometimes consciously, but sometimes unconsciously, the question for me is, how am I going to tell this story? What's the best way to tell a story? And I don't think every writer does that, but it's certainly my way of doing it.
So your voice becomes sort of dictated by how you're going to tell the story.
Exactly. I mean, there are books of really wildly different things. I mean, a book like Nothing But the Truth, my voice is totally removed from the story. You get a book like The Beginning, The Muddle, and the End, which is my silly love of puns and nonsense. That's my voice, and my kids will tell you how annoying my puns can be, and so forth. I mean, it's just this, you know, in one way or another. And I'm very lucky in the sense that I always have ideas. I have too many ideas.
Do you write them down?
No, I have this notion if they're really going to stick, they'll stay in my head.
Okay.
And if they're not there, then they're not worth keeping.
Okay.
So occasionally I do write stuff. I shouldn't say never, but no, I don't keep a journal or any of that stuff.
Okay.
I don't outline books.
Wow.
I just sort
They
of...
flow?
That sounds beautiful, but
You
they
wish.
bump. It's
They
like
bump.
they're those highway bumps, you know, to keep you from going too fast. No, the process of writing for me is one of discovery. I'm telling myself the story.
Wow.
And Robert Frost, the poet, said something that I dearly love. He said, if there are no surprises for the writer, there are no surprises for the reader. And then
Yeah, that's great.
I like that idea.
Yeah. So how does it come to you? Is it just a moment of inspiration?
No. You know, I begin with some premise, a character, a situation. I think really what it is that I'm reading or telling the story to myself. And the difference is that I have the option to change it. If you read one of my books, you're not supposed to change it. But I can. And I can say, oh, what happens if we go this way, if we go that way? What should happen here? What would the character do? So they emerge. And bear in mind that when you read one of the stories, you read it from page 1 to wherever it ends.
Right.
But I write to, say, page 10 and then say, oh, wait a minute, wait, go back and you need to do this, you need to do that. And then, I mean, my own cliche is you can't write a good first page until you've written a good last page. So you go back and forth and write in the middle and so forth. In other words, I'm just working on a book now and I'm suddenly realizing, well, if on page 60, if I had this scene, then that would allow me to do this over here. Now, having done that, I have to write it in such a way that it seems like it all flowed naturally.
Right.
It never flows naturally.
No. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like a choose-your-own-adventure for the writer, you know, because the kids can do that. You know, turn to page 73 if you want this to happen. You know?
Well, I mean, there's part of that. I mean, sometimes you get stuck. I mean, you get stuck all the time when you write every day. And then you're just trying to figure out what's the logic. You know, people don't think of books as an exercise in logic, but a good plot is a real sort of logical puzzle. You have to figure out how it goes from A to Z in some sort of way that the reader can follow every letter and see the connections.
Yes,
but if you go from A to Q, back to M, et cetera, it drives everyone crazy.
Right,
so.
yeah, jumps around too much. Now, you were saying that you really never had formal training in writing, and so that's one reason why your voice can vary so widely and so wonderfully. I've read that in school you had, you know, a challenge, an obstacle. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, my parents, I went to school in the 40s, keep in mind, and my parents... And I have a twin sister and an older brother. My older brother was considered the family genius. So if you come after family genius, you must have a problem, right?
Oh, boy.
Right. Anyway, and a twin sister was very bright, and then there was me. They seemed to have noticed something, and they had me tested. I have no memory of this. I don't know when.
Okay.
And they found something which used to be called dysgraphia, or symptoms of dyslexia, I think it's called.
Okay.
Letter reversals. I mean to write blue, I write true.
Oh.
Or as an aunt once said, I could take a 4-letter word and spell it 5 different ways, or something like that.
Okay.
Well, Shakespeare never got his name right.
Okay.
Right? So I'm in good company. Anyway, the point is that it comes across as very sloppy. And so the key is that my parents, probably from embarrassment, as parents sometimes are when their kids have problems of this kind, never told any of my teachers that, and certainly never told me. I would not discover this till I was an adult.
Wow.
And the result is, if you look at my work, it looks sloppy because there's misspellings, there's words out of order, and so forth, so on. And so I'm constantly being told as a kid, you're not trying, why aren't you like your sister, why aren't you like your brother, et cetera, et cetera. So at a certain point, I didn't want to deal with English classes or writing classes and so forth. And I didn't. So just the reading.
But today, that's almost a gift to the kids when you go visit schools.
Yeah, they love to hear that story, you know. When I tell them at the end of my second year of high school, the English teacher called up and told my parents I was the worst student they ever had, they go, "Ooh," but they say it with a smile, you know. And
That's
no,
great.
I mean, I can say unashamedly that one of the great moments in my life was learning how to use a spell checker.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, this was thrilling. I don't use that word often.
Wow.
I was so excited because this made a huge difference.
There it is, the push of a button and the problem is gone.
I mean, the thing is, you know, for example, I have a very big vocabulary, but I don't necessarily know how to spell all those words. So, I mean, that's a good way of defining how this problem was. So.
And yet somehow you have written, you said 59 books?
69.
69 books, okay. And here is the wonderful Poppy, which you said this series is the most autobiographical?
Well, it's really, I think it is, in the sense of I'm not a mouse, I'm not a porcupine, though people have suggested otherwise. But the family story, it's about a family. And Poppy is this sweet, loving mouse, and she has a husband eventually as the series progresses, and their kids and so forth. And my wife insists that when she meets her husband, that's our story, she says.
Oh,
she thinks, and so.
That's great.
Anyway, and there is even in Aerith's birthday, which is one of my favorites in the series.
Oh, me too.
Basically, it's a story about how Aerith becomes the sort of stepfather to these little foxes. Well, I'm a stepfather. And I've never, it's not that I've forbidden my stepchildren to read these books. I've never said, hey, here, you ought to read this.
Right.
I've never quite know how they would take it.
Yeah.
Someday they'll come across it and read it, and I wonder if they'll make the connection. But so, I mean, it's things like that. Right? I mean, how do you be a stepdad? And there's a lot in that of these kids.
He does it with such humor.
Well,
it's great.
I think, I'm not sure where he comes from, but I think, I mean, you were asking how stories develop in that way. I mean, you have this character of Poppy when I first wrote the books, and she's very sweet, but she's not syrupy. There's an element of toughness and directness about her, but she's very loving. And he's almost constructed in opposition to that. He's very prickly, he's grumpy, he's not social, all these things that Poppy are, but he's also a very loving character.
Yes.
And the sort of subtext of all this is that he really loves Poppy, and she never pays attention to it. I mean, he is her best friend, but he's the one who talks about love and so forth about her, and it's never mentioned in it. And now, I just wrote the last book in the series, and there's sort of an arc in the whole series of Poppy's life, and so I really didn't, for my reader's sake and for my sake, I didn't want her to die.
Oh, good.
I just couldn't deal with that.
Yes.
But I needed to find a way to end the story and to make it work in that context. And so, just to give a little bit of it away, Aerith thinks that Poppy has died.
Oh.
In a very funny way.
Okay.
The readers know that she hasn't, but he thinks so in a very hopefully funny way. And he decides he's going to have this huge funeral.
Oh, goodness.
For her, but he's going to be the center of the funeral.
Oh, wow.
And it's really, the funeral is all about him, not her. I mean, it's right in character and so forth. And then well, I won't tell you what happens. But, and it's funny.
When is it coming out?
In the spring.
Okay.
And it's called Poppy and Aerith.
Spring of '09.
Right.
Oh, that'll be fun. That'll be great, because what a lovable character. And I know so many kids love the Poppy, just the Poppy and Ragweed and
right. I'm going to miss them.
Yes, friends. Shifting gears, as you will, The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. And I have to say, this is one of yours that more kids come in and ask for. I mean, this is a book that goes for girls and boys. We were talking about the girl character, and what are girls connecting to in this? What are you hearing?
Well, it's everything. I once got a wonderful letter from a girl who said, "Dear Avi, I've read True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle 16 times," she said. "It's the only book I read. My mother says I can't read it anymore. Please write a sequel so I can do another book." Well, I didn't. But anyway, I've asked the kids what it is, particularly the girls, about the book. And I think that what they identify with is, in terms of the age of the girl and the kids who are reading the book, that this comes at a time when they're beginning to feel all the social pressures that come down on young women about who they are, who they look like, how they should respond to authority, their own individuality. And this is a story about a girl who makes enormous changes, and there are enormous pressures not to change and enormous pressures to change, and how she responds to it. And I don't like to speak for my readers, but I suspect they find in her struggle a sort of parallel struggle that they are going through, whether consciously or unconsciously, and they identify with her enormously.
That makes a lot of sense, and the boys just love the adventure, the sheer adventure
Absolutely.
of it.
And the other side to it is that the book is open-ended. You never really know what's going to happen to her at the end.
That's true.
And lots of people say, well, do a sequel.
Yeah.
And I won't do it.
Okay.
Because I want that to be open. I want every reader to say, this is what Charlotte does or doesn't do.
Okay.
If I said, she became a secretary or something. I mean, it's, it's
what a letdown.
or a doctor or anything.
Yes.
I want it to be open.
Right, all the possibilities.
Right.
All right, now I've told you that this is such a favorite of mine, Bright Shadow, and that when I'm asked for fantasy, this is so the book I want to go for. And, you told me it took you 14 years to write this.
It did. It came out of, originally, when my older kids were very young, and I used to read them fairy tales, and there were all these wishes sloshing through these stories. And the wishes always were sort of positive. And I began to think, well, is there a downside to having wishes? And that's the way this story evolved. But it's... there are all kinds of fantasy. We talk about fantasy, but there's high fantasy and what they call low fantasy. The kind of fantasy that I write tends to be couched in a kind of realism. There is an element of the fantastic, but I'm not interested, how should I say, the fantasy allows character and story to emerge. It's not about the fantasy, if I can make that distinction. It's just a different style.
Yeah, and there's an ingredient of it. Okay.
And so what we have is a story about a girl who has these great powers, but the hook in the story is that she, does not know she has them. And there are only 5 wishes, the last 5 wishes in the world. And the only way she can discover that she has them is by using them. But she has, as it were, a boyfriend who thinks he has the wishes.
Right.
And he keeps doing things which forces her to use up those wishes to get him out of crises.
Yes.
But as the wishes begin to dwindle, she understands what she has. The boyfriend doesn't. And then, in the end, she has to make a choice. Does she hold on to these wishes or extricate her friend from a real big crisis?
Yes. Yeah.
And then the book does something that I've never done in another book, and I don't know if other folks, writers, have done it. Basically, in the end of the book, she's got, I think, one wish, and she offers it to the reader and says, do you want it? With the notion that this is not a gift, this is a huge responsibility.
Yes.
And
what a great question.
You know, and I think it ends. Do you want the wish?
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that the way it ends?
I don't remember.
Yeah, well,
I just remember.
We could open and look.
My I could. My joy at her having them and watching her use them. And what if people need the wish? Gareth pleaded. If wishes can be found, people will look.
There you go.
How cool.
I should read it.
Yeah, it's a great book. You'll love it.
Okay.
All right, now this one. What a gear shift here.
Oh, my.
And I have more fun book talking this because there are kids who love to be scared and who love that suspense.
Scary book.
And this is a heck of a book.
Yeah, I have a bet about this book that if you read the first 2 pages, you won't stop reading it. It's a scary thriller. It's not for young kids. What's creepy about the book is it's really based on something that really happened to me.
Wow.
How can I tell the story? It's a complicated story, but the essence of it is I had just moved into an apartment. I was actually living up in New Jersey, not so far from here. And the phone had never rang before. It was just like the first day. The phone rang, and I pick it up, and a voice says, hello, and I say, hello, who's this, Joe? And I said, what do you want? And he said, I just killed someone.
Wow.
And I said, what?
Whoa.
And then he said, I want to talk about it.
Oh, my gosh.
This is really creepy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I won't go through the whole thing, but that's the premise of the novel.
Yeah.
And take it from me, and I talked to this guy because I sent my wife out to call the police and try to tap this phone, and it was really very disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the gist of it is that 6 months later, I was still talking about this, because really, and one of my sons said, Dad, I'm sick of hearing you talk about this. Go write a book about it, he said.
Good one.
And so I give it some closure.
Very good,
so
yes.
the premise in the book, the way it opens, is real, in the sense that I experienced it.
Right.
But everything else was my way of wrapping a story around this to get it out of my head. And that's where it comes from.
Great way to process things.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, it is one of my favorites, and I know kids just who like that kind, they really enjoy that book. It's a really great one. We're going to take a little break, but when we come back, we're going to be taking a look at the Newbery Award winning book, Crispin. Stay with us.
No matter where you live, life in the ocean depends on you. Do your part to help protect it. Recycle and dispose of your trash properly. To learn what you can do, go to keepoceansclean.org.
Excuse me, what time are you guys leaving? We're gonna rob your house tonight.
Don't come closer. I have rabies.
Don't you wish there were warnings to protect you from life's risks? With diabetes, there is one. It's called A1C, a simple blood test that helps measure your risk of serious complications. Learn more at diabetesa1c.org.
And welcome back. My guest in the studio today again is Avi, and we're about to take a look at Crispin, The Cross of Lead, which is your Newbery Award winning book. Now this is set in medieval times, and he starts out with next to nothing. It's a pretty tough beginning.
The original working title of that book was No Name.
No Name.
Which actually in some ways I like better.
Wow.
Because it's about a kid who's got nothing. He doesn't even have his name, and part of the story is discovery is who he is and even what his name is and why he's named that and so forth and so on. It's, you know, how do you talk about a book? It's a story. It's a story that I thought of, and when I originally thought about it, I didn't think of it as a one-volume story. I thought of it as an extended story, and then there was a sequel to it, and then there'll be a third one to it. So, but it's one of the few times that I've ever thought of a sort of comprehensive story that's rather epic in its dimensions and so forth. But essentially, It's a story about a kid who needs to find himself in a world that is not terribly interested in him. But the real strength of the book is not so much Crispin, but his friend Bear, who, again, the writer can be lucky. I've invented this huge character. There's some similarities to Aerith in a way, that he's big and gruff and so forth, but he's a very powerful figure, and he takes Crispin in and converts him into a human being. Crispin is not much of a person to begin with, and he gives him a soul and teaches him life.
And Bear has that hint of a past.
Right. This is a period of time, the end of the 14th century in England, in Europe, in which is really the birth of the modern era. In England, feudalism is collapsing. There's about to be a huge uprising, the Peasants' Rebellion. English has become the language of the land. It hasn't been for many years.
That's interesting.
Universities are being founded. The Protestant Reformation will take place within 60 years. So it's a cataclysmic period of change in Western history. And in a certain sense, we don't think of it this way, but the notion from which the book comes is that the idea that we are individuals comes out of this period. And even politically, the notion that all men are created equal, this is the period of time that phrase is enunciated for the first time.
Wow.
So it's the beginning. I mean, it's the sort of childhood of the modern era. So
all the seeds are
yeah,
sown.
and so it's really a fascinating period of time for me, and that's what the book is about, really. So.
And it's hard for him to be a wolf's head.
A wolf's head, he became. I mean, that's his total negation. In this period of time, if you were declared a wolf's head, that is to say, outlawed, it gave free rein to anyone in the society had the right to kill this boy without any punishment. Or, I mean, you were allowed to do that. You could hunt this person down like a wolf.
Wow.
And so he's absolutely nothing. And it's his emergence from being nothing to this. And the cross of lead refers to the only thing that he has. His mother leaves him a cross of lead, very crude, and something's written on it. He can't read it, and only subsequently learns what's on it. These crosses were given to people during the time of the Great Plagues, and they were extremely crude. I've seen them. Of course, they've dug them up and so forth. There's nothing. They are the least ornamental. They have no visual beauty at all, except their simplicity, their crudeness.
What was their purpose?
Hope.
Oh, okay.
Faith.
Okay, all right. Hang on to this.
If nothing else is going to save you, nothing else can protect you, but this ugly, crude symbol of something bigger than yourself, and that's the story.
The power of the religion. And then we had at the edge of the world.
Edge of the, what is it called? I forget. Crispin at the edge of the world. Well, that's the sequel. And the edge of the world, I mean, in this book, the sort of the byline of the book is something that Crispin says at one point. The more I came to know of the world, the more I knew it not.
Wow. Wow.
In the sense, as so many of our experiences, as we get to know more of the world, one of the things that we learn is we don't understand it as well. And it's one of the contradictions of growing up and knowing things. I often say that the really wise person is the person who knows how ignorant they are.
Wow.
Right?
Well, you said to me about questions, Living with questions.
Somebody told me this, I don't know where it comes from, it's a saying that you will continue to grow and develop if you live by questions. But if you only live by answers, you stop growing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. Now you continue with historical fiction here. This one, The Seer of Shadows, but it has a wonderful ghostly...
It's a ghost story.
...element, yes.
It's a ghost story.
Yes.
I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in ghost stories.
Okay.
And it takes place in New York City in the 1870s when photography is becoming the vogue and available. It tells a story about a boy, Horace, who's an apprentice to a photographer. The photographer wants to create a hoax of taking photographs with fake pictures of ghosts. When Horace takes pictures, a real ghost appears. And he doesn't believe it, he refuses to believe it, but this ghost keeps coming back into his pictures, and more to the point, the more pictures he takes, the ghost begins to come into life. It's like a photograph being developed. And then she's a murderous wrath, and though she has reason to.
Yes.
And then he has to get rid of her.
Yeah.
And how does he do that?
I like the scene of her coming down the stairs with the lit candle.
Oh, you like that?
Ooh.
It's all about black and white. Light and dark.
Wow. Photography.
Even the elements of race, blacks, whites. It's all about...
Wow, that's complex.
Well,
did you know you were doing that?
Yes, I did.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's way cool. All right, now you said that this is your true self.
Oh, I don't know.
A beginning, a muddle, and an end.
This is silly stuff.
And I told you that the Abbott and Costello routine, who's on first?
Right. Well,
you nailed it.
I know Abbott and Costello.
Yes.
And this is the kind of stuff that at the dinner table I've been known to send children away, not because I've sent them away, but they don't like to hear my jokes and puns. I happen to love language and playing with language, aphorisms, riddles, puzzles, and puns. I'm very fond of puns. I happen to believe, he said, congratulating himself, that to really understand puns, you have to be very intelligent.
There you go.
See?
All right.
Now, is that true? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You have to have a big vocabulary to appreciate puns. And you got to be quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, this is a book, a beginning, a muddle, and an end in itself is a pun. And it's all about writing. But there's nothing that I don't believe in there about writing, but it's silly and hopefully funny.
It is. It's absolutely hilarious, and I couldn't believe you could maintain that pace.
Gave me a headache.
Yeah. Now you have launched a whole new you, and you're calling it Eyewitness with the letter I. This is book 2, you told me, Iron Thunder being the first one. This is Hard Gold.
What these are historical adventure stories. But I really do a lot. This is the only time I've ever done original research. In other words, diaries, letters, and stuff, to really create a sense of reality. This one deals with a kid who goes west in the Colorado gold rush of 1859. Not the California one, not the Alaskan one. We have had a lot of gold rushes in America. Anyway, this one takes place in 1858 and 59. And so I'm trying to tell what it was really like to go west, but the story is about a kid who he lives on a farm with his family, and who knew how prophetic it was. It's about they can't pay the mortgage and it's about to be foreclosed.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know this was going to happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then his uncle goes out to get gold, and then he gets into trouble, and then the boy goes out after him. And what he finds is what he doesn't expect, both in terms of finding gold and finding his uncle and what his uncle is like, really. And it's an adventure story. It's an old-fashioned Western, really. And there'll be more in the series. And the other thing that it does, just as the first one, which is Iron Thunder, which deals with the Battle of the Monitor and the Merrimack, and it's not only the story, but it's I hate to say it, but it's true. It's illustrated like a textbook in the sense there are charts, maps, pictures from the time.
Oh, that's great.
So that it really tells the reader what things really look like and how things worked and so forth and so on.
That's great for the boys who like to read and they're really looking for information.
Yes, precisely.
So that they can completely get the truth and the understanding of it.
That's it.
And really know it.
You know, for example, I read lots of diaries about going west. And, you know, if you've seen Westerns, we've all seen Westerns, there are always these pictures of these enormous empty expanses. Well, at this time, when you read the accounts, one of the things that astonished me is that the Oregon Trail, which is the primary way west, was crowded. That at night, all you could see was a long row of campfires.
What a picture.
And there were endless wagons going west. Not to say that there weren't some who weren't in isolation and got lost the way they often show in the Westerns, but in fact, the highway was crowded. It wasn't as bad as the Beltway, but...
and the emissions aren't,
little different.
Well, a little different.
I don't know, there were a lot of dead cows, a lot of dead horses, and a lot of graves.
Yeah.
A lot of graves.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love writing these books because I learn a great deal, and I choose subjects that I think I know a little bit about, and then to my great delight, it turns out I didn't, and I learn a lot more. So.
You know, you hear about the DoubleTree Inn, and I finally learned what a DoubleTree was by reading this book. I had never known that.
There you go.
Avi, you have an incredible range, an incredible gift. It's wonderful to know your story in light of all the wonderful stories you've given us.
Thank you.
And thank you for the great books. We'll look forward to the new ones, and thanks so much for being here today.
My great pleasure, Barbara.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being with us, and as always, come see us at the library.